I think the main one is that muzzled dogs bite or muzzled dogs are aggressive, which is just not true. We've spent a long time working with dogs that use muzzles for all sorts of different reasons. And if they use them for bite because they bite, that's fine. But plenty of dogs use muzzles because they don't bite.
Welcome to MythBarkers, where we make dog parenting easier by sniffing out the facts and debunking dog tales.
So by now you'll know Yena and I have been dog parents for many years. We also have now professional careers centered around the dog space. We know all too well there are way too many misperceptions and misinformation about dogs. This is why we felt inspired to come together to create MythBarkers. But we've been doing this for a little while now, and I feel like we're only just scratching the surface on debunking some of the biggest myths about dogs in the health and wellness space, training and behaviors, adoption and rescue, etc. By now, most of you will also know that I'm a big lover of pit bulls and the bully breeds. Can't get enough of those big block heads, those house hippos. They're the best.
So cute.
Today's myth is directly connected to them, but not limited to them. It's one of the more prominent myths in the dog space, I think. So we wanted to talk about dog muzzles. We have a very special guest today. I think if you're not a dog parent who actually uses a muzzle, you may have a misperception of it. You may not fully understand the importance of muzzles. You'll have a reaction, and we want to just get to the bottom of it. So Yena, I'll let you introduce today's guest and we'll get going.
Absolutely. Our guest today comes from the rescue dog space and has a background in animal behavior. For many years, she worked at the UK's largest rescue, where she oversaw the rehabilitation of dogs with behavioral challenges. It was her first-hand experience there, along with her experience adopting a rescue dog of her own, that inspired her to start her own company and ultimately a whole movement that would redefine the muzzle advocacy. She is transforming how dog muzzles are viewed and worn, not just in the UK, but worldwide. She's the founder behind the Muzzle Movement. Please join us in welcoming Clara Hewson to MythBarkers. Clara, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. That's the best intro I think I've ever had.
Well, there was not much work on our part because the what you've done already is so impressive. All we did was just list it. But we're so excited to really delve into the questions and get more into this movement. So what are the most common misconceptions people have about muzzled dogs?
Yeah, I think the main one is that muzzled dogs bite or muzzled dogs are aggressive, which is just not true. We've spent a long time working with dogs that use muzzles for all sorts of different reasons. And if they use them for bite because they bite, that's fine. But plenty of dogs use muzzles because they don't bite.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things I learned when I started working in the rescue dog space, and not realizing how helpful a muzzle can be in training and behaviors and helping dogs kind of coexist. How do you feel when you hear that people assume all these muzzled dogs are dangerous?
I think it's unfair. I think that there's a lot of guardians out there that don't use a muzzle for their dog because they're worried about that public perception of their dog, and what other people might think about them or their dog, that prevents them from using a muzzle in a context that actually it would be really helpful. So I don't think that the stigma that is around muzzles benefits the dogs themselves or the people that have dogs that wear muzzles. So yeah, it's really sad. It makes me sad. Yeah.
Absolutely. And what would you say are some of the different other reasons that dogs might wear muzzles?
I could list so many, but the most common ones that we'll see, it really depends on places in the world, but there's breed specific legislation. So that dog has been deemed a dangerous dog, but actually it's just their breed or their type that has meant that they need to be muzzled, not because they are a dangerous dog.
Yeah.
There's scavenging. So dogs that pick up items they shouldn't, particularly in countries where there's lots of bait, or in town centres, cities where there's rubbish or things you don't want your dogs to pick up. So they're two really, really common reasons for us, in particular, that we see muzzles on dogs that are not aggressive dogs.
I will say my late dog Bodhi had this thing where he needed to pounce at every chicken bone on the street. It was so stressful walking him because I had
Yeah.
to always Hawkeye look at every corner and see if he's going to lightning launch and grab one. And I've also ripped out so many from his mouth because he
Yeah.
had gotten to it. So that's a really, really big reason too. I think you just don't want them to pick up dangerous
Yeah.
things off the
Yeah.
street.
That's the second most popular reason that our muzzles are
Wow.
purchased. Yeah, and it's scavenging, and it's literally scavenging anything. It can be food, it can be toys, it can be a dog that's on, got special dietary requirements, like they're allergic to things, or
Mm.
maybe they have Cushing's or diabetes. Like, yeah, the scavenging is massive, and it's probably more prevalent than the majority of aggressive behavior that we assume muzzles are used for.
Wow.
I don't think people ever realize that. And I think general population of people see a muzzled dog on the street and they go, "Oh, that dog must be dangerous. That dog must be aggressive, and I'm gonna avoid that dog."
Yeah, we have to be really careful about our preconceived ideas about what a muzzle dog is. But on the flip
Mm.
side, we also need to be careful because there are some dogs that do wear muzzles because they need space. So we can't advocate so far that we tell everyone, oh, all muzzle dogs are friendly, because some dogs rely on their muzzles for space,
Mm.
and to let other people know to leave them alone. But a simple question, oh, what's the muzzle for? If it's safe to do so, it might not be because the dog bites, and if the dog does bite, it doesn't mean that it's a bad or an untrained or any of those things either.
Mm.
That's a great point. So, can we go back to the beginning? Can you share a little bit of the story of like what inspired you to start the muzzle movement?
Yeah, yeah, I love telling this story. So I previously was working for Dogs Trust, which is a really, really big rescue in the UK, and they have a very narrow destruction policy. So very few dogs are euthanized in Dogs Trust care. I think it's like
Mm.
300 a year, and they have tens of thousands of dogs through their doors. And the euthanasia
Wow.
policy is based on health. So for them, health is like more than just physical health, but it's mental well-being as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I was working alongside some really challenging dogs, like dogs that had caused significant injury to people. They'd killed another dog. They were going through court cases. So these were really quite complex and high risk dogs. So I was muzzle training all the time. I was muzzle training dogs, on behalf of future adopters, so that once that dog was adopted, it already had that skill in its back pocket. But
Wow.
also to keep some of the staff safe as well, because some of these dogs were quite risky with the handlers that were working with them every day. Um, and I adopted a dog just like that, who had a bite history, who had poor dog interactions. And I wanted to make a muzzle for the dogs I was working with and my dog, Tolly. So I made one, I drew it on a piece of paper and I sent it to someone and I was like, do you think I could make this? And they were like, nope. And I was like, okay. So I got a version 3D printed, and
Ah.
I posted it on Instagram, and people were like, I'd like one, I'd like one. And I was like, oh no, this is more than just the sort of niche dogs that I was working with. So we launched a Kickstarter. We sold 800 in 30 days, raised £46,000. And
Wow.
yeah, and here we are. I had to quit my job, but yeah, the goal was never to leave rescue, but this grew so big so quickly that I had no choice. And now we're a team of 12. We ship thousands of muzzles
Amazing.
every month. Yeah, so
I
Congratulations.
I love this story because it comes from a genuine place of I need this for the dogs, so let's make one. And then
yeah,
you heard the no and you were like, no, I'm gonna
yeah,
make it happen.
yeah. I was like,
Um,
I'll figure it out.
of course you did. And can I ask you, what did you want to change about the muzzle design from the previous to now?
Yes, my dog in particular, because I was really just thinking about Tolly and these dogs I was working with at this point. I knew that he needed easy access to food. So when I was delivering treats through the front of the muzzle, he was finding it difficult to grab them, which was causing a lot of frustration, which meant that our training sessions weren't very fun. So
Mm.
I wanted a treat hole so that he could have treats really easily and he could be trained at the same time as being muzzled, not one or the other.
Mm.
And I also was always worried about him in hot weather because the muzzle that he had previously didn't allow him to open his mouth very much. Um, and I would worry that he would overheat and that would have a knock-on impact on his emotional state as well. So the
Yeah.
hotter he was, the more frustrating it was to get food, the less likely he was to have good interactions with people and dogs. And it was kind of this chicken and egg, like what came first? Was it the dog frustration or was it the fact that the muzzle's frustrating? And it was just a culmination of things. But yeah, those two problems were the problems that I wanted to solve selfishly for my own dog without realizing that everyone had the same problems.
I mean, that is not selfish at all. It was like you felt this need for Tolly and you were like, I'm gonna advocate for Tolly. Did you see a visible difference after the muzzle change in how the stress level dropped and how the training sessions went?
Yeah, so Tolly actually never got to wear the final version of the muzzles. He only ever had prototypes because he was euthanized because of a medical condition. So he actually never
Mm,
got to wear the muzzle that I designed for him in the
mm,
first place, which is called the Tolly. But in the
oh.
prototype that he was wearing, yeah, we could notice so many different things. Like food delivery was easier. He didn't want to rip it off his face. He was comfortable wearing it. But also we noticed like there was a knock-on effect on the way that people saw him when he was wearing this bright, colourful muzzle. It was like people were more likely to ask questions and they weren't so judgmental. And in some cases, they actually saw the muzzle because his previous muzzle was black. So
Mm,
you wouldn't really see that until you were really close. And by then you were like, oh, he's got a muzzle on. So at least if it was someone that was going to give him space, they could see that from sort of 10 meters away instead of having to get closer. So that made training easier as well.
Mm.
oh, so it automatically gave a less stigma and more space.
Yeah, and we've had that feedback from the
Fantastic.
public, but that wasn't intentional. That was because I wanted colourful muzzles. And the thought wasn't, I'm going to make muzzles that are going to destigmatize. It was really like, I would like a colourful muzzle for my dog where he can take treats and pant. And then everyone was like, I want one, I want one. And I was like, oh, actually, lots of people have maybe been thinking about this, but I just did it. So.
Mm.
I don't have a ton of experience. I've only used muzzles in a handful of cases. Can you talk about the different types of muzzles and like why some are maybe not as good or safe?
Yeah, definitely. So there's lots of different styles of muzzle available. So you've got things like your occlusion muzzle, which is the fabric muzzle, sometimes called a Mickey muzzle or a vet muzzle. And they're fabric and they hold the dog's mouth closed. And they are only safe for sort of 5 minutes at a time because they hold the dog's mouth closed, which means no panting, no drinking, no vomiting. So they're typically used in a veterinary setting. However, they're really easily accessible online. So quite often, dog guardians that don't know any better will end up with these muzzles because they feel like they're less intimidating without realizing that they're harmful for long-term wear, because of
Mm.
that risk of overheating predominantly, but there's also the risk of being sick and aspiration. So there's the occlusion muzzles, which are probably the most risky. And then you've got your sort of pet shop muzzles. Baskerville's a really common brand, which absolutely have a function. They're super accessible, relatively cheap. You can mold them to shape, but they typically don't provide much pant room. So they're suitable for training and they're suitable for short term or cold weather. But in hot weather or high intensity activities, they aren't the safest option because that dog can't regulate their body temperature in the same way. And then you do
Wow.
have other options. So you've got things like vinyl, which again, brilliant if they are the correct size. And they're particularly good for scavengers. You've got the they're sort of clear plastic vinyl because there's very few holes in there. So if you've got a really high risk dog that potentially has had a couple of surgeries for ingesting items, and it would potentially be euthanasia if they were to ingest something again, then yeah, vinyl is a really good option.
Wow, there's a lot more kinds than I was familiar with for sure.
I could carry on, but there's so many. Yeah, they've all got pros and cons, but the two really important ones, yeah, is to avoid occlusion unless in a veterinary setting. That's probably the one takeaway. If I could give somebody today, it would be that.
Thank you.
Wow, that is a really important takeaway because when I think of muzzle, I think there's like two that pop into mind, and that's the one I recently had experience with at a vet clinic. And even then, Luke just potted right off. He was like, "No, I hate it!" Like immediately, he didn't want to do it. But
Yeah.
leaving that for more than 5 minutes really would be a detrimental situation.
Absolutely. And I think that that's the majority of dogs' first experience with a muzzle is in that context, like a vet, and it's a tight and uncomfortable muzzle. So their first ever experience of a muzzle, not only is it a muzzle that's poorly fitting, but it limits everything they can do. Everything that
Mm.
would be normal for them to be able to do, all of the body language they would normally use, they can't at that point. So they really don't want them on their faces for long.
Yeah, it's an immediate, like, sort of negative experience. So how do you prepare a dog to be comfortable with wearing a muzzle?
You read my mind.
We're synced.
So every dog's an individual. There will be lots of dogs that have never experienced a muzzle before, and it's easier to introduce a muzzle appropriately that first time than it is to undo those negative or aversive experiences that they might have had previously. But let's go with a dog that's never experienced a muzzle before. And my biggest tip would be just take it slow because it is muzzle training for a reason. It's not the same as a collar. You can't just put it on the dog and expect them to get over it. We're inhibiting their ability to do things as they would previously, and it's something that they can feel on their face and they can see in front of their eyes. So
Mm,
it is a training program and it requires lots of small, frequent sessions. I would say a minimum 3 weeks to muzzle train a dog, and that's a dog that's had no negative experiences and they're, happy, confident, comfortable with no medical conditions. So yeah, go slow, make sure it's really positive. And I would start personally with a muzzle on the floor and scattering treats around, and then I would build from there.
And
wow.
in what instances would you suggest, if dog parents are listening, that they should potentially muzzle train their dog?
I think muzzle training, at the end of the day, it's a fun training game. Like if you never use the skill of a muzzle in real life, that's great. But it doesn't mean that you can't practice it at home because it's really just a fun game that's full of snacks and treats. It's a confidence building activity. So putting your face in a novel object and getting fed snacks for it, the dog doesn't know what the muzzle's for. It doesn't know that it's anything apart from a game until it's in contexts where it's no longer so fun.
Mm,
But if I was going to, say to everybody, go home and muzzle train your dogs, the main reason would be in case of emergencies. Like you just don't know when you might benefit from a muzzle in future. I've ended up using muzzles for my dogs in all sorts of situations that I didn't think I would have when I muzzle trained them originally.
It
mm.
doesn't mean that they're not friendly dogs. It's just a skill. It's kind of like crate training. That a lot of people are so averse to, like, oh, I don't use a crate. But in certain situations, especially emergencies, it's so beneficial to be able to do that and not cause your dog extra stress.
Yeah, that's it. And particularly like we were talking about this as a team in, if you've got things happening where you need to be able to get your dog out quickly, or you need to be able to lift the dog into a car, or a stranger is going to handle them in an emergency. It could be all sorts of things. It could be a house fire, it could be car
Yeah.
crash, it could be a medical emergency with the dog, it could be they've injured themselves on a hike halfway up a mountain and nobody can get them down again. You just don't know, and it's better to have the skill and never use it than not have the skill and wish you had it in a time of like real emergency.
Absolutely agree with this because every time, so Luke is reactive, so every time we take him to the vet, he has to have like chill out meds from the previous night and then again the day, of early in the morning. And if I think of an emergency situation where just needs to be taken in and handled by people that work at the veterinarian clinic, that would give me a lot of anxiety because I know that he would be freaked out. So if he's muzzle trained, he would be okay to do that, and I wouldn't be putting him or anyone else in danger. So I've like this like light bulb went in my head. I was like, yeah, you need to buy one right now.
Immediately.
Immediately.
Yeah.
We know someone we can get
Wow.
one from now.
Oh, you know what? I'm going straight first order immediately. Just decide what color.
Yeah, I think lots of people can relate because the majority of dogs, although we like to think most dogs are happy-go-lucky, actually they're all individuals. They've all got things they like and all things they don't like. And if they were
Yeah.
put in a scenario where those things they don't like were thrown at them unexpectedly, any dog is capable of aggressive behavior. They just need to be provided with the right set of circumstances. Hmm.
That's a really good
Yeah.
point. And when they're injured, I feel like they can get more defensive and protective about their own body because they're already injured. So they may react differently from their normal state as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So when a dog's in pain, the risk of aggressive behavior increases, but also like
Mm,
post sedation, the risk of aggressive behavior increases. So it could be after surgery as well. That once they're out of the vets and you're lifting them in the car, they've already had a stressful experience. They're feeling a bit painful. You're manhandling them, and then that's when incidents can occur. I mean, incidents can occur at all times, any time. But yeah, after a painful or a scary experience, then tolerance is lower.
I can definitely see that. You know how they get the cones after they have operations? Are there any situations where a muzzle would be better than a cone?
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, this is exactly sort of what I did with my own dog. He had to be neutered. Very, very fearful dog. He was really worried by the sort of large cone, but he was already muzzle trained, and this was post neuter. So we needed to stop him from sort of licking and irritating the area, but it wasn't that he had to be particularly like heavily rested or crated for long periods. So we did use his muzzle because he was already comfortable in it. He could sleep. We just popped the scavenger guard on the front, and it meant that he didn't have this sort of bumping at the door and frustration to get to the water bowl, and he could just
wow.
sleep. Yeah,
Wait, this
It-
is fantastic.
Yeah.
This
yeah.
is revolutionary. Wow, that's amazing.
We've had customers send us photos of all sorts of things. Like we had a few weeks ago, a customer submit a photo of a dog that needed a nebulizer, and so the dog was already muzzle trained, so they put the nebulizer in the front of the muzzle, secured the muzzle on, and then the nebulizer had to remain on for 10 minutes a day. And because it was already muzzle trained, it wasn't that foreign of an experience for the dog, whereas it would have been if they just had to hold it on the dog's face for 10 minutes. So yeah, it's
This
really
is
cool.
fantastic.
I love all the other use cases in more everyday life that are not related to anything behavioral. Potentially, it's a useful training tool. It's really
Yeah, that's
eye-opening.
it. And we had vets contact us because I worked in an industry where some of the dogs we were handling in the vets were aggressive dogs. So the risk to the veterinary staff was really, really high,
Mm,
particularly in that like risky period post anesthesia where they're kind of waking up, but they don't know where they are, who they are. There's strangers all around them. And you have to take the intubation tube out at the right point. It can't be too early, can't be too late. But you can actually extubate through the treat hole in our muzzle, which means whilst the dog is waking up, they can still be safe and the vet staff can still be safe, which again was not by design. That's just really talented, safe vets that have figured that out on their own. But it means that they can better treat some of the really high risk patients that they weren't willing to sedate before, which is really
mm.
cool.
Wow. The use list is getting longer
Long.
and longer. And I'm sure you experience this as people submit photos and stories. Like people are using this for various different reasons, and it's
Yeah.
making situations easier and safer for everybody.
Yeah,
I
so
love
I thought I'd use muzzles in every context that muzzles could possibly be applied. But I'm surprised, probably like monthly, by someone sending me a photo of something that I was like, that is so clever.
I love this. Wow.
and I love that you also just gave us a little insight into also drugs coming out of anesthesia and medication and the effects that they have on them, because this is another thing I think people don't realize. I just recently learned this, that some drugs like trazodone can actually make dogs more aggressive when the intention is to sedate them. I just had a case with this with the shelter dog
Really?
that the vet had guided them to be on trazodone. They were having some reactivity challenges. They're nervous, they're anxious, they didn't know how to handle their feelings. They weren't trained. The vet suggested to drug them with high doses of trazodone. It actually made them more uncomfortable because they're out of it. They were more
Mm,
Yeah.
aggressive. And I
yeah.
Yeah,
think this is
there's
something people don't realize. So I just like had to get that in there because I'm like, oh my God, yes. Like we need to
yeah.
share this information.
There's
That's
definitely
interesting.
phenomenal use cases for trazodone, but I think we do have to be aware that disinhibition, which is what it's called, where they lose the inhibitions that they had previously, is
Mm,
possible. So it's not a guaranteed side effect, but it is a possible side effect.
yeah.
So that's why we should really always practice a trial of any behavior med before the context at which it's needed, so we can see in a safe environment
Mm.
first.
Thank you. How
Yeah.
did you learn all of this? Is this from your degree before you were in rescue?
Yeah, so I have a master's in clinical animal behavior, which
Wow.
I don't know what the equivalent is in the US. I don't know, but it's yeah, it's like after uni postgraduate kind of
Yeah, I think there's a
qualification.
master's, but I
Yeah.
Is
don't
it?
know if I've ever heard of that program here. There probably is. I probably haven't
Yeah,
looked into it.
there was lots of veterinary behaviorists on the same course as me. Lots of people in similar roles to me, so working with like really high risk dogs or really complex behaviors that needed sort of a really thorough investigation, I suppose, more than just we need to loose lead walk or we need to prevent the dog from jumping up. This was dogs that were self-mutilating or,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
poor things.
So you mentioned you're from the UK. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you to talk about the breed-specific legislation in the UK. For people who are not familiar with it, what actually is the law and like what are your thoughts on the situation?
Yeah. So breed specific legislation is quite a hot topic in the UK at the moment because it changed at the beginning of 2024 to include another breed, which is the first time that the UK government has added another breed to the banned breed list in 30 years. So we have now 6 breeds in the UK that are banned, but the 2 that are probably most recognizable is the pit bull terrier, and it's a type. And so it's pit bull terrier type, and the XL bully, which again is a type. So what makes the UK breed specific legislation quite, broad is because anything can fall within type. So it's not genetics, it's visually what they look like, what their measurements are. So a dog that is, a mastiff crossed with a cane corso might fit into the XL bully type if it has a broad head and withers up to X high. So it encapsulates more than just the XL bully or the pit bull. And well, there was 55,000 XL bullies in the UK that registered under the exemption scheme. So if your dog wasn't registered as an exempt dog in January 2024, then you were effectively keeping that dog illegally and it could be seized at any time. And there's no guarantee that they would release that dog back to you. Yeah, and there was no rehoming. So all of the dogs, XL bullies that were in kennels at that time, will have all been euthanized. Yeah,
I had
yeah.
no idea.
Mm.
So what was what was the process of getting exempt? Was it just like paperwork?
Yeah, so the exemption scheme is so you have to basically allocate one human who is that dog's registered keeper, and they are responsible for that dog for the lifetime of that dog. The registered keeper can't be changed for anything apart from serious medical conditions or death. So my dog is exempt as an XL bully and I am his registered keeper. I can't have more than 90 days in a year where he's in somebody else's care, and I am effectively his guardian until I die or he dies. There's no rehoming or rehousing him. And then there's terms like they have to be insured, they have to have third party, they have to be neutered. So everyone was given deadlines where their dog had to be neutered, and it doesn't matter how old that dog is. They could be 13 if they're an XL bully. The law is that they are neutered at that age, even if it's against the advice of the vets, i.e., it's got a heart murmur and it's dangerous. And the same if the dog is suspected to be an XL bully, it doesn't matter how young it is, the muzzle and on lead disclaimer is in place regardless. So all XL bullies in the UK have to be on lead and muzzled at all times, including in the back of the car. The only places they can be unmuzzled is private property. So your own home, your own garden.
Do you think this law has effectively decreased the number of incidents?
No. So historically, I mean, we've had the breed specific legislation for a long time because they banned the pit bull sort of 20, 30 years ago. And we still have pit bulls now. So considering it's illegal to breed them, illegal to rehome them, we still have them here 20 years later. So it doesn't prevent these dogs from, existing in the UK, but much less so prevent incidents. So we have seen actually dog incidents in the UK have still continued to rise even post XL bully ban. And that's because the majority of incidents where there's a bite involved, they're happening with familiar people in the home environment, and the bully ban doesn't help with any of that because these dogs at home are unmuzzled. And well, it's not actually these dogs doing it in the first place, but even more so, the bully ban doesn't prevent the scenario at which bites are actually happening, which is at home with people that the dog knows.
This is maddening because these dogs are just discriminated against just based on how they look. It has nothing to do with their training, their personality. If they've had a previous incident, it's just it's a mass. Okay, this is what they look like. They may or may not be that breed. You have to do this.
Yeah, that's it. It was really stressful for 55,000 guardians in the UK. And more that have been impacted since, like all of the people that were in rescue that were caring for XL bullies that they desperately tried to get into a home before the 31st of December in 2023. If they couldn't get that dog into the home, Either it lives in kennels for the rest of its life, which for the majority of dogs is not an idea of a good quality of life, or euthanasia. And then there's people that are still now having their dogs seized and taken to court because people have reported them as XL bullies, and they may or may not be, but they'll have prolonged periods in police kennels, which can be anything from weeks to years before that dog's released home, and it might never be.
What? That's insane. And also just the fact that the number of incidents has not decreased since, and there's
Yeah,
all of this logistics and headaches happening in
yeah,
the mix is I feel like it's also so hard to enforce because if it's just based on looks and not even the DNA makeup, then what are we
yeah.
really calculating here, and how is that helping people
That's
or
it.
dogs?
Yeah,
Um,
and in the UK, between different, like we call them counties, different dog legislation officers will have a different perception of what an XL bully is. So, in one county, a dog might not be considered an XL bully by a DLO, which is the enforcement officers, but in another county, it might be. So, there's not even consistency in the way that it is. XL bullies are identified in the UK. So, it's really frustrating and it's really worrying for people that have any bull breed because the media kicked up a bit of a storm about the bully and said, oh, it's the bullies that are causing all these bites. So
mm,
anybody with a bull breed felt the stigma of that, whether it was an XL bully or a Staffy or a King Corso or a Mastiff. The public's perception of your dog has changed as a consequence of some of them being labeled as dangerous.
Curious about what your thoughts are on this too. There is a lot of negative media perception, as you just spoke about, around bully breeds. And what do you think are the most harmful examples of that? And how can we reframe the thinking? Because it's really not helping the dogs.
Yeah. So I think that the most harmful stereotype is that, bull breeds are dangerous. And that's further exaggerated by things like breed specific legislation or laws that mean that they're muzzled or on lead. But really, they are a large dog that has big jaws. They are big, they are powerful. There is a risk in caring for a large breed. It's not just bully breeds, it's any breed that is a large breed. And yet, they genetically, historically, maybe there is, they like grabbing, they like ragging, they're big. But realistically, every breed has the possibility of doing harm. And there isn't a breed that is more likely to do harm. It's just we hear about it more because these dogs are bigger and because the media will, one, say it's an XL bully or a bully, even if it's not. And
Mm,
two, they will use, even if it's not a bully, they'll use pictures of bullies in the marketing that they do for their recent Jack Russell bite in the home or something. And they'll usually pick the scariest quote looking bully breed that they can to further kind of push the narrative. So really, we're just being influenced by the media. We tried
so
really hard in the UK to campaign against that when the bully ban came
yeah.
out, but because that's what's being fed to the majority of people, that's what they believe, regardless of whether it's fact.
I feel like
Yeah.
there's an association too with muzzles and the bully breeds because when you think of a muzzled dog, if you're not using one actively, you probably think of a bully breed. And working in rescue here, that to me terrifies me because there's bully mixed into almost all of these rescue dogs. They're not purebred dogs. They're
Yeah.
because of the situations going on and dogs, irresponsible owners, everything, they're getting mixed up. So how do you know if a dog is a bully breed or not? Right? This pit bull is a type.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not a
it. I think
specific breed.
what we were really trying to campaign for in the UK was treating each dog as if they were an individual. So if that dog
Mm.
is a high risk individual, then they should be muzzled and on lead. If that dog is not a high risk individual, then they shouldn't be. And that high risk individual can be any dog. There can be high risk Frenchies. There can be, some of the worst bites that I've seen are not caused by bully breeds. So I think really we need to step away from breed stereotyping and instead remember that each dog is an individual. They have their own preferences, likes, dislikes.
I really think that is the key because then you're looking at each animal, each dog as an individual, and we also have to factor in what is their environment, what is their context, and what is their upbringing, and how are the caretakers taking care of them? Are they providing safety? Are they leaving them in situations where they have to protect themselves? Are they observing them? Are they taking in the cues that they're trying to show you? So, what I really, really hate about these articles is also the fact that they just remove the human responsibility away from the
Yes.
situation.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what was the context? Was this dog pushed into really, really, drastic situations? Were they feeling
Yeah.
unsafe? Or is it just this dog that looks like this bit this person? Like,
Yeah.
I want to hear where the human beings were, how they were reacting, how they were training this dog. So a larger conversation around this, I think, is really important because media outlets just want attention and clicks, and they're going to sensationalize whatever they can. And if there
That's
is
it.
already a preconception about certain breeds, they're just going to use that to amplify it. So I hope that this episode reminds people to dig a little deeper into the story. Look at the dog as you would like an individual, because that's what they are. Like, I've seen dogs that are just, if there is any preconception about the breed, they break all of it. I see dogs like that all the time. And if we love them, we have to look deeper in and see, like, what are your quirks? What makes you tick? And that's part of really recognizing them as like a whole being rather than a thing.
Yeah, I agree. On the flip side, though, I will say, in case anybody's listening with a dog where they think, I've done everything right, and my dog has still had an incident, that's also okay. Like, you
Yes.
can have the best dog, the best training, the best care, be the most observant dog guardian, and your dog can still have an incident. It doesn't make you a bad guardian. There are bad guardians out there, absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you're doing your best to keep your dog safe and you're being responsible and an accident still happens, that's okay.
Yes.
You can prevent the accident by getting a muzzle.
In some cases, yeah, probably.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we understand you're a big advocate for force-free training. What role does like positive reinforcement and that force-free training, like, how does that set the dog up for success?
Yeah, so a lot of the dogs that I am coming into contact with are dogs that have, quite specific needs. And they really already have enough to worry about in life. They don't need to be worrying about when the next aversive thing is going to happen. We really try and focus on making sure that we set those dogs up for success. And I'm not saying that, dogs won't have aversive experiences even with our best, management and training plans. It will always happen. There's no such thing as completely force free, right? The dog might run to the end of the lead and it might jar them. It's not that we set it up that way, it just might happen. But for me, these dogs already have so much to think about. They're already trying to learn so many new skills. The best we can do is support them with doing the right thing instead of punishing them for potentially doing something that we have arbitrarily decided is wrong, because the dog doesn't know what's right and wrong. The dog is being a dog. Even biting is a behavior that dogs do.
Right. Dogs in the wild have specific behaviors. It's all part of the predatory drive, right? The different steps.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, biting is a normal behavior. It's communication at the end of the day. Growling is body language. It's communication at the end of the day. And we are telling dogs, you can communicate, but not like that. And I think it's really important that if it is a dog that uses aggressive behavior, that we aren't punishing the use of that aggressive behavior, because really all we do is suppress that aggressive response until they can no longer suppress it. And then quite often that's when you'll see it came out of nowhere. I say that in quotes because it very rarely does, because body language is being missed and communication is being punished.
I love that. That's so important. And I think too many people don't understand their dog's body language or misinterpret their dog's body language. Oh no, my dog's friendly. And you're like, oh, that's tense, stiff body. What are you talking about?
He's wagging his tail though.
And that was one of the first episodes we ever did with our friend who's a trainer and a behaviorist. Like, oh, a wagging tail does not mean that dog is happy. There's a lot of different feelings and different, cues that dog's depends on the context. You really need to understand what's going on in full.
That's it. Yeah. And I think for a lot of dogs, they need support, safety. They need someone that can reassure them, someone that they can rely on to get them through something that is potentially challenging, not someone who is going to continue to knock their confidence further in a situation that they already feel unsafe in. Because all they're
Mm.
asking for is help at the end of the day. They're saying, this is too much, I'm struggling. And if your knee-jerk response is to tell them off for that, then that's pretty sad, I think.
So exploring sort of like a different aspect of this topic. So when dog parents are giving their dogs a walk and they're wearing a muzzle, and if they come across some negative comments, what do you think is the best way to handle this? And also, what do you wish that the people understood about this situation?
I've experienced this firsthand with Tolly countless times. Either people saying, well, why don't you just train your dog then? Well, muzzle training is training.
Mm.
And also, I am with his muzzle on. But yeah, quite often I would say, well, he is in training. But there's also your dog shouldn't be out if they're wearing a muzzle. Like your dog shouldn't be here if they can't be here and social. Which is unfair because I go to places as a person and I should be able to be there even if I don't want to sit in the cafe and talk to everyone around me. I should be able to enjoy the cafe all the same.
Mm.
So again, I would typically my response is he's in training at the moment. And if people approach the opposite end of the spectrum with too much positivity and they're like, oh, can I say hi? Dogs love me. It's the same response. It's we're training at the moment. But yeah, you have to be quite a tough cookie. I hope it's changing. I feel like it's changing. But at least when I had Tolly and he was wearing his muzzle all the time, there was a lot of unnecessary judgment. And you do have to have a thick skin and you have to remind yourself that what you're doing is for your safety, your dog's safety, and potentially even the person approaching safety. And that's always the right thing to prioritize over the opinion of people who aren't in your shoes.
I
Mm.
think that's important, regardless if your dog is wearing a muzzle or not, advocating for your dog. If your dog needs space, your dog doesn't want to meet new people, even if it looks friendly, advocating to say, thank you for asking, but we're going to keep going or whatever. It's so important. We need to learn to do that more, I think, as dog parents.
It's really
Yeah.
scary to do it for the first time where you always feel like, oh, like, am I going to upset this person? Are they going to be mad at me? Are they going to have a negative perception of my dog if I say no? But it just gets easier with practice. The no is a complete sentence, but if you
Hmm.
feel like you have to justify it, then yeah, in training or he's contagious is always a good one.
And also contagious, they're like run.
Yeah.
um, just also the fact that you know in your heart and mind that this is for the safety of everyone involved, I think makes it easier to then kind of grapple with those comments because people might not know because they just lack the knowledge of the range of reasons why a dog might wear a muzzle. But if you know that it is for everyone's safety and have confidence in that, it's like easy to be like, yeah, you learn one day, but this is for everyone's
Yeah.
sake right now.
I always think to myself, how lucky you must be to have never had a dog in an emergency where you've needed a muzzle, or the guardian of a dog that potentially is a risk, either to themselves or others. I think that there's this perception that all dogs, when trained properly, would never, and that's all in quotes as well, because
Mm.
that's not true. You can raise a dog in perfect conditions and you can't control everything. So, yeah, I think how lucky you must be to never have needed, but you might in the future, and hopefully you'll remember that interaction.
Yeah.
We had just had an episode on therapy for reactive dog parents. And this is one of the things we talked about. It's really hard for people to understand when they haven't met or interacted with a reactive dog what that's like and how isolating that can be at times, how there are so many misconceptions about you and the dog as you're experiencing this together. I think this is one of those examples where don't let the looks really determine the situation. Just understand that everybody has different situations and they should really all be accepted.
Yeah, I think living with a dog that poses a risk to themselves or others is so taxing. Like
Mm.
the thought that goes into keeping your dog safe every day is exhausting. I have to do it with one of my dogs currently who is really high risk. We have to micromanage lots of things about his life. We have to think before we go somewhere, where's he going to be? The windows have to be locked, the doors have to be locked. He's on a long line in the garden. Like the thought that goes in to keeping these dogs safe is so extreme that when you get negative feedback, it feels personal because you've gone so far and you're so invested in keeping this dog safe that yeah, words can really hurt. So I think everybody should just be careful.
You know, I was gonna say shout out to Jess Adam, who is our recent guest, who has
Yes.
created the beautiful community of handlers and humans, and all about the emotional toll that challenging and complex dogs have. If you've had one, it's like, and if you know, you know, and if you don't, like, you have no idea. But it's a lot, and it's definitely worth acknowledging because it can be such an isolating experience. And so, like, bringing that sense of community together. And I feel like you've built just like this beautiful community that the Muzzle Movement has created over the last few years. What is
Mm.
the impact that you've seen by bringing these people together to advocate for their dogs and keep their dogs safe? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
I think because there's so many different dogs using muzzles for so many different reasons, it helps people realize that actually there's, that dog maybe has a similar behavioral issue to what I'm dealing with at home, and muzzles made it easier for them, so maybe I should try. So it kind of helps foster curiosity, I suppose. And we find that actually the majority of our customers are first time muzzle purchasers, and that's because they hadn't considered a muzzle before. Either they thought like it wasn't serious enough, or they were worried about the perception.
Mm.
And that's kind of changed because of the educational content we put out, but also because they can see our community of people working through similar behaviors with dogs in a similar situation. So it's kind of, yeah, it's just giving people access to support and reassurance that they're not doing something wrong.
Reassurance is such a big word here. And from, as isolating as this community can be, the reactive dog community, when I see other reactive dog parents and how much love they pour into their dogs, it's so heartwarming, and the compassion behind it is so heartwarming. It actually gives me it restores my faith in humanity in a genuine way. So I can imagine your community is like full of people like that are just like, oh, I thought I was alone in this anxiety, but I realized this dog has the same exact reaction to street food that my dog does. And it just like kind of spirals into this like amazing sort of co-creation of new products, new ideas,
Yeah.
new ways of problem solving.
And we've got a really big network of trainers that support our customers as well. So if
Oh,
we've got trainers all
wow.
over the world that have like sets of our muzzles, that if the customer is struggling to size, either they aren't able to because of health or medical or like dexterity, or they're not able to because the dog physically can't be measured, whether that's like they won't sit still or there's a risk that they might, use aggressive behavior. Then we have trainers all over the world that they can go to, that can help find the right size and give them ongoing muzzle training support in person. So
What?
that,
This is amazing.
yeah, that is a
Wow.
huge part of our community building, is the support of trainers all over the world who are willing to give up their free time to support muzzled dogs. So yeah, that's probably the coolest thing that I think we've been able to achieve. But
So beautiful. I'm
yeah.
floored. Perfect. Oh, wow. Thank you, Clara, so much for joining us. You can follow the Muzzle Movement on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. And if you can let us know what your website URL is so our followers can just go ahead and purchase it right now.
Yeah, so you can find it at themuzzlemovement.com. Super easy.
And what is that process like for people who are maybe interested in potentially getting a muzzle for the first time?
So when you head to our website, we've got a bit that's called How to Measure for Your Muzzle. So you go on there. There are 3 measurements that we require because all of our muzzles, although they aren't completely custom to the dog, we have standard sizes. We do still need to make sure that those sizes are the most suitable. And if they aren't, we'll help you find them somewhere else. But we want those 3 measurements to make sure we get the right size the first time. And then you can either order something that is ready to ship, so that's pre-made, and you can shop from our pre-made section, or you can have something that's completely color customizable, so you can mix 7 basket colors, 20 strap colors, hardware, you name it, you can build the muzzle in whatever colours you want to suit whatever gear your dog has.
That's really cool.
I don't know why. I kind of want to do like a standing ovation right now because I am so in awe of what you've built. Not only is it a revolutionary product, but it's also such a loving community that makes so many people feel seen. That's helping dogs, that's helping veterinarians. And I love that you are finding new ways that these muzzles are being used every month. It just means that there's so much more here, so much more to grow, ways to expand. I was thinking actually during the conversation, it would be so cool if you could hit up all of the vets in the US and just be like, hey, you know what could be really good for the visits for certain dogs? You know, this could
I would
be
love to. We
life-changing.
have some vets. We have some vets in the US that have our muzzles and use them in practice. Yeah, I would love to. If there are vets in the US out there, you drop us a message.
Well, and
Oh
please
man.
consider MythBarkers a part of the Muzzle movement now. We are converts, absolutely, and want to help
Mm.
advocate. And the work you're doing is so important, and the shifting of the stigma that muzzle dogs are not dangerous, they're not bad dogs, and we need to kind of further that message. So thank you so much for joining us and being so generous of your time and your knowledge. And thank you to everyone for tuning in today. Stay tuned for the next episode of MythBarkers.